Hey everyone, this part of my voice, I'm a little bit, got a cold, so I'm a little bit wacky in my voice. This, Michael lecture deals with how to read a book, chapters 5 and 7, active reading, inspectional reading, analytical reading are the two ways that Mortimer and Adler describe it. I had another version of this video, but it got lost in the bowels of the internet, so there you go. Basically, so in the 1970s, 1980s, there's a French philosopher, Paul Ricoeur, who spent a lot of time thinking about interpretation of texts. We'll talk a little bit more about philosophical hermeneutics later in the course. Hermeneutics, by the way, is just a fancy academic way of saying interpretation, so don't worry about that. But for right now, I want to talk about some of the ways that Paul Ricoeur's work helps us as we think about being active readers. It's interesting, Adler and Mortimer, they say things like, you got to be a demanding reader. You need to ask questions about the book. So as you're reading, you're asking, I think one of the things they say is, what's the argument being made? What is this book as a whole about? Right? And so as you're reading, you come up with a different idea of what that is, and that is shaped and changed. Then they talk about X-raying a book, where you're able to look through the book, sort of, and see the underlying structure, the entire, they call a plot, the entire plan, what it is that unifies this book as a whole. So there's two things that they're getting at. The first is, and this is just basic standard academic stuff, is you need to be able to sum up every book in one sentence. That's not a joke. A lot of times at the master's level, probably the basic skill that you're demonstrating at the master's level is the ability to, with precision, with clarity, and a very small, pithy statement, sum things up so that you can analyze them. Great example would be, alright, if someone asks you what's the Bible about, right, and you were to respond to that, could you give what you think is the entire message, the unity of the scriptures in just one sentence? I think growing up I would have said something like this. I would have said, well, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him shall have eternal life. That would be, for me, as a child, as a young man, that's how I would have summed up the scriptures. And I think it would be a little bit different for me now. If I'm looking at the scriptures, I would say maybe something about, how the Creator God, the scriptures are about the Creator God and his history of the world never, ever, ever giving up on us. Something like that. Well, either way, the point is that you're trying to get all these different angles, different areas about the text down into one simple, pithy, this is what it is. That's good active reading, being able to do that in such a way that you're able to communicate to someone else what this book is about. Now, if you have a chance, I think I'm actually grading right now your submissions for your REA 3s. When you got bibliographies, right? So you have some books that you've identified that are going to be helpful for your project. Well, go ahead and look at your books and see if on the fuller.edu, the fuller.edu/library, the library website, log in and look for articles that are about the books that you have. After you've read them, and for this week, you're going to be basically analyzing one book. You're going to be giving me a one-page book review. And I want you to look at that, and I want you to be able to say, hey, this is what this book is about. I want you to be able to summarize what it is accomplishing, how it does that, just being able to analyze it, right? Once you've done that, go to fuller.edu library website and look and see if there's an academic review, and then read that review and see if you agree or disagree with the professional reviewer. See how it is that the professional reviewer summarizes the content of the book. Then look at how the professional reviewer assesses the content of the book. It's basically analyzing it, saying, this is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong. Now, I mentioned Paul Ricoeur a little bit earlier. Let me get back to him. Paul Ricoeur had this kind of a metaphor right, for how it is, what reading is like. And he said that reading is like what we do when we are the jurors or the judge in a case, right? So there's a criminal defense, right? And in this criminal defense, the judge is sitting there, or the jury is sitting there, and they're listening to all the evidence, right? And then there's two basic stories that's being told. There's the prosecution story, and then there's the defense's story. And the jury is trying to decide who's telling the most accurate version of events. Is what really happened, is it more like the prosecution story, or is it more like the defense's story? And so as the evidence comes in, the jury narrows down what it thinks is possible to say this actually happened. Right? So as more and more witnesses and more pieces of evidence are submitted in, the jury can rule out some possibilities, right? The jury can say, no, this definitely didn't happen because we have this piece of DNA evidence. We know that the defendant was at the home at the time of the crime because we have this DNA evidence, this piece of hair that was left at the scene. And that since the defendant had never been there before, we know that the defendant was there that night. So we can rule out any story that's being told. Any story about this, the events of this evening that do not include the defendant being there. Right? So as the jury hears more and more evidence, more and more data, they're able to narrow down the possibility of what's the true story or true stories about the events of the night in question are. The same thing happens when you're reading a book. When you start out a book, when you read the first sentence, the book could be about anything. Now maybe you'll have a little bit of evidence because you've looked at the title, and so you can say, oh, well, the title of this book is, what, The Brothers Karamazov. So you know that this book is probably going to have something to do with some brothers who have the same last name, Karamazov. But still, at the beginning of the book, you have some possibilities, some ideas, some hints. Maybe they're Russian. Karamazov sounds kind of Russian. Dostoevsky, the author, he sounds kind of Russian. So maybe you have an idea of where it's headed, but until you begin reading, you can't start narrowing down the content of the book. Recurd even says that in the case of fiction or books like novels, you start out and you have, well, the world of this book could be anything. Like when you start reading The Brothers Karamazov, you don't know if magic's possible in this world. You don't know if it's a world of science. You don't know if it's a world of that's primarily about politics or power. You don't know if it's a world that's about love. You don't know what the world's like. But as you read, you get more and more information, and you close down possibilities of what this world is like. There's fewer and fewer and fewer possibilities, such that by the time you get to halfway through, say, The Brothers Karamazov, you can say with certainty there are some things that are not going to happen in the world of this book. So when you're halfway through this monster book, you're able to say, look, I don't know how it's all going to turn out. I don't know if they're going to find the killer. I don't know who it is or why or when he or she did it. But I can say this: whatever happens, it's probably not going to be the solution to the problems of the characters. Is probably not going to be a unicorn flying in on a rainbow. And you know that because you've read so much of the story, and you've had so much of the world of the book described to you and explained to you, such that you can say that's just not the kind of thing that's going to be happening in this world, in this book. Well, the same thing's happening really when you're doing academic work. You're asking, what is this book about? And as you go farther and farther, and you ask more and more questions of the text, you have the text reject possibilities. No, this book is not going to be talking about, quote-unquote, the historical Jesus. That's just not going to be happening. This book is not even going to entertain the possibility that, a multiracial church is anything but standard in the New Testament. Right? There's going to be all these possibilities of what the world might be like that the book is going to filter out and reject and reject and reject and reject, to the point that by the time you're done reading the book, you should be able to say, this is the story of the book. This is the world of the book. I'm going to describe it to you in one sentence. The underlying logic, the theory of this book, the world this book describes is this. That's good active reading. If you have any questions, tweet me, email me, call me, send a video. All right, see you.